Thank you very much, and a very warm welcome to the Guardian Book Club. Today we've got a very special guest, Terry Pratchett, who's come to talk to us about his most recent novel published in October, Unseen Academicals. Terry is the first author we've had at the Guardian Book Club who, when I've said to him, "And would you like some water?" he said no.
I'm very surprised at that.
Well, a lot of them have felt no or thought no, but all of them have said yes. So
that's their first mistake.
Yeah. So Terry has reached literary status where candour is possible, I think. It's great to have him. I do a little sort of 2-minute sort of spiel, Terry, usually introducing the author, which often is based sort of rather, perhaps you might think rather lamely, on something one of my students has said about the author concerned. And Terry's already told me that he thinks that beardless I look insufficiently professorial for this evening's occasion. So I'm wondering if that is the right way to start. But I will take, because you might be quite interested by this. I do remember when I was sort of G'd up to read, I had read a couple of your books, but G'd up to read some more by a student essay, which was actually, it's a couple of years or so ago now, on the topic of why great English literary authors, sometimes gave their books Latin titles. So this student had written about Biographia Literaria by Coleridge, and Liber Amoris by Hamlet, and De Profundis by Oscar Wilde. And I remember suddenly coming across a paragraph, sort of nestled mischievously at the heart of the essay, about carpe, which talked about carpe jugulum, or jugulum, I'm not quite sure which, and indeed passed the judgment that, as you might know, it's a book somewhat about vampires, and that passed the judgment that actually this was by far the most witty use of a Latin title.
Probably was.
And Terry's, I often think that sort of example stands rather well for the special thing about Terry's books, which is that sort of mixture of erudition and
idiocy?
And erudition and idiocy, yes, all right, let's have it like that, erudition and idiocy, which is, that's a kind of singular thing, and I'm sure all of you here are well versed in the erudition and the idiocy, and actually I'm probably the least representative reader in the room, I'm afraid,
probably.
Terry.
Yeah, I could rather tell.
Because I've read 6 or 7 of them, and I know that's not enough. I'm a late starter. Okay. Well, I throw myself on your mercy.
I have to put up with this sort of thing every day of the week, guys.
Yeah. And I throw myself on the author's mercy. So if I ask questions which show a lack of sort of Pratchett erudition, you must be gentle with me.
I will not hesitate to inform you.
Okay. Well, actually, maybe I could start with that. You can tell me. Let's make a virtue of a necessity. You can tell me, because I read the Unseen Academicals, I suppose, largely as a sort of self-contained book. I mean, when you were writing this and when you were planning it, to what extent did you think that you had to make it, were you aware of trying to make it consistent with other ones, that there are sort of rules you've set up which you have to follow?
Bloody hell, for a professor, that was quite a good question. There are a set of rules in Discworld. I can't write them down because I only know viscerally what they are. But that Unseen Academicals is clearly a Discworld book. What the person who doesn't know much about fantasy will be surprised at is the lack of fantasy in Unseen Academicals. There is a certain amount of it. I mean, it has about the same amount of fantasy as a Greek play for much the same reasons. I kind of take the view now that I've done so many Discworld books no one's going to pick up a Discworld book and be surprised that it is, in fact, a Discworld book. The biggest problem I think I have in breaking new ground, and I'll come back to that later, is making certain that I can carry the long-term readers with me. I mean, Discworld has been going on for 3 decades now. And the reason it has survived is that I bring the changes. And indeed, have spent some of that time actually learning how to write. So I believe that the books have got better, and I would agree with your daughter Maud, who said that Wintersmith was my best. Although I now think Nation was my best, but Nation is in fact not a Discworld book, which surprised a lot of people.
I should explain my daughter came into the green room just before we came on to berate me for my ignorance and point out that I really wasn't an appropriate person to conduct the interview.
Yes,
that was what it felt like. But anyway.
So it is a Discworld book, and it's got it has a kind of but it's a Discworld book in a sense for insiders as well as outsiders. It's entirely understandable if you don't know much about the history of Discworld, because a lot of it's about football and the social history of football, and quite a lot is about the way academics bicker among themselves, because you can always get a hell of a lot of fun out of that, especially when they're wizards. and there's more in there about the crab bucket theory of society. I mean, the thesis I worked on was that football became very big in Victorian England, but you had more and more people streaming into the cities away from their rural crafts and so forth. And they, as it were, formed clans among the football teams. I'm cutting through a lot of stuff here, but we're getting there. And I started thinking about neighbourhoods, small, closed, working-class neighbourhoods, and it's quite difficult to get out of them. I happen to know, because when you're the only boy who, on your council estate who's past the 11 plus, and the only boy to go to school wearing a uniform, you learn to run and climb very, very fast. No one says, hey, that's good, he's got out of it, he's moving up one bit. No, it's quite hard, to get your hat off the railway line before the express goes past. So I had some experience of that, and so I kind of stirred in a certain amount of, for want of a better word, social theory. That it's hard to get out. You know about the crab bucket. You can't get out the crab. Put crabs in a crab bucket, and they all start milling about, and they don't know what they're doing. But every time a crab starts climbing up, some other crab grabs hold of them, and they fall back again, and that's how it goes. And this is, to an extent, it's like that even with my own genre. People say, science fiction and fantasy should get out of the genre. If you do get out of the genre, you've been a sellout. You've sold out.
But the genre, which you sort of made your own, really, I mean, I did, out of one of my children's school library, get the first Discworld novel out. And
that's definitely a genre.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this really is quite closely connected to sort of fantasy fiction. Whereas now you feel that they're about something. I mean, this is about football and academia.
The thing is, all the way through, it's not like I can say this one's going to be about. It's going to be about that.
Yeah.
It's how they're going to shape out as you start. Because one of the things that Unseen Academicals addresses was something that struck me ever since I was about 12 and read Lord of the Rings for the first time. And it kind of surprised me. I was actually, I should explain, to the best of my knowledge, my parents have never been to a church with religious forethought in their life. They went there to get married, obviously, and my dad went to, actually we had a vicar for my dad, but he rode a motorbike, which is fine by my dad, so it didn't count. And so it was not a religious objection, but in Lord of the Rings, a man can fall, but an orc can't rise. And that struck me. Yeah. We are all of our time, so you can't go back and say, nya to J.R.R. Tolkien for not doing about, because it was a different kind of world with certainly a much a history, nothing like that I have experienced. And I wanted to build that in as well. That's a kind of side theme to the whole thing, Mr. Nut the Orc.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is. I mean, it may be J.R.R. Tolkien's times, but I think a lot of people have sort of thought that that's representative of one of the maybe limitations of the kind of thing that he was doing. That, like you say, orcs are, there they are. I mean, and we think it even more having seen some of those films where you actually, they're physically like that as well.
They're cannon fodder.
Yeah, and they're sort of, and therefore kind of badness is just a very simple thing, isn't it, in that kind of narrative?
Yes, but you can actually, well, we could go get all sociological about this for quite a long time. But this world has evolved some quite interesting things, I think. Ankh-Morpork, the main city, is a big city. It's a melting pot with some big lumps in it still, but it's still a melting pot. And so you do get the trolls and the dwarves and the vampires. They work in the kosher butchers. And on the whole, they are citizens. And that's it. And generally speaking, there's some of them in the city watch as well, which the patrician of the city makes certain of. So that's it. All they are required to be is citizens and to keep the peace. I mean, this is a long way from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's a more sort of amiable world, isn't it?
Well, there are different things. I mean, the point is, what you're thinking there is this is a different type of fantasy, largely because quite often it's urban fantasy, and that doesn't mean that we've locked the dragons outside, because the dragons are where they always are. The dragons are inside us. So you get a different kind of fantasy. In I Shall Wear Midnight, which is the next children's book that I'm writing, I have Mrs. Proust, who's an urban witch. She won't go outside the city, things go moo at you. But she can make the paving stones rise up. And when she walks past an equestrian statue, the horse will turn its head. All her magic is involved with the city. And hang on, why aren't you asking questions?
Yeah, no, I will. You can stop.
You can go and have violin lessons. Right, ask me another question.
Okay. Well, I'll ask you. Can I ask you a dry literary question, which is about?
I want one of those. Yes.
All right, good. Because you were talking about the shape of it, and of course, one of the things about, I think each I set the Colour of Magic, which has got sort of sections in it, but each of the Discworld novels I've read is, I think, chapterless, as this one is.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, there are breaks now and then. There are breaks, gaps.
Some are. Yeah. I think Going Postal and Making Money had them, because I actually discovered the joy of chapters.
The joy, yes.
By doing the Victorian chapters, a shot in the dark. That's fun to do. That's like footnotes upside down.
Yes. Well, have you ever read Tom Jones by Henry Fielding?
Of course I have.
Well, that's a good one.
Anything at that age that resembles sex in any way, you're going to read it, aren't you? But do carry on with the question.
Well, no. Well, I was hoping to find out about why that is, why it's. Because it's quite sort of...
Because it's a narrative. Because our life, we might look back on our life and see it as chapters. It doesn't really appear to have chapters at that time. I always do it for the kids.
Yes.
Because there's the kind of, the covenant with the parent. I will read this, I will read to the end of the chapter. And so they're totally stuffed if there is no end.
So that's a... Well, it's quite nice, though, to have staging posts, isn't it? I mean,
Well, I always believe that ellipsis or ... as we call it in the trade, often does the trick.
Yes.
It's a scene change. In a sense, since you've pointed that out so accurately, I write my books like movies. I see my books as movies. So basically, I use the kind of what I call the subchapter as a scene change, to another part of the forest and so forth.
Yeah. And these two, these worlds you bring together in Unseen Academicals, they do seem to have a particularly sort of, natural affinity. I remember once there was a rather wonderful Tom Stoppard play called Professional Foul. I think it was a television play, which did the same, brought together these two same things, football and academia, and sort of made them clash. Some philosophers had gone to a conference in Prague, and the England football team was staying in the same hotel. Yeah. and they sort of meet and they clash, actually. There's a fight between the professor of moral philosophy
I would like that. Yes, I have to look for that. But the thing is, from my point of view, in ordinary fantasy literature, to be a woman is to have shaken a double one in the great dice game of life, because there's just not a lot of things you can do. What I enjoyed in writing Unseen Academicals was the history of Glenda. She's like quite a few ladies I have met, mucked about at school, didn't pay much interest, found out later in life she really had a fully functioning brain, and now she runs the nighttime kitchen in Unseen University. And she actually finds, and you can sort of chart her progress through the book, that sometimes just by speaking out to the right people, she's not social climbing in any way. She actually finds that she has a voice and an intelligence, and a point of view, and actually sensible people will listen to it. And you can see her kind of leveraging her way up. It's like steer pike, but with a nicer person and better pies.
I thought Nut, actually, that plot rather reminded me of the Gorman Gast novels. You start at the bottom of a sort of weird, almost feudal institution.
Yes, but you see, my characters are real. Mervyn Peake is was slightly more insane than me.
Yeah.
And I think the Gordon Gast trilogy was absolutely superb. I mean, it was a milestone in the history of fantasy writing. But mine actually got common sense, and in fact, it's the kind of shared quality of most of my worthwhile heroes and heroines, that they do actually have a deep, old-fashioned common sense.
And when you're putting, I was about to say a bad thing, I was about to say putting in jokes. Do the jokes, because the jokes are what lots of people, including myself, really look forward to, I have to admit.
William Shakespeare actually did put his finger on it when he said, don't forget the knob gags.
He wrote that, what, in a footnote to his own sonnets?
I think it was What to Do About Knob Gags. I noticed, for example, my friend Stephen Briggs actually adapted Unseen Academicals for the play, for the stage. The important thing about this is that it's actually impossible to do. But nevertheless, he did it, and that included a football pitch, which was a square metre. And you got everything. It was like a Picasso drawing of a horse. I'm sure you understand me. It was a few lines, not the whole horse, but you looked at it and you saw the horse. Look, this is bloody literature I'm talking here.
Yes.
I like a nod from you.
Yes, I was.
And
if I nod too hard, I look slavish, and that's bad too.
It went extremely well, because he got the spirit of the thing, and he kept in, for want of a better word, the knob gags, or the little gags that break the pomposity, the little bits where someone misunderstands something they've been told, so we can always have a little laugh at the ignorant person, which is always a good gag. you have to keep them in. For example, there's the character, because these people have read all this anyway, there's the character of Pepe,
Yes.
whose sexuality is a bit questionable, or even by Pepe. And he's fun, so practically everything he says goes in the Shakespearean knob gag folder. But it serves as kind of a leitmotif, as rather than I'm rather pleased about that.
Well, the word leitmotif is explained in the course of the novel, actually, isn't it? Doesn't I think Nut explains what it is to somebody.
Yes,
to Trev.
I could be considered to be a teacher of sorts.
Yes, well, it does have the word nyctophobia on the second page, I think.
Yes, I believe so.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And
I did that one without looking it up.
Did you?
Pleonism I had to look up.
Ah, right. Yeah. Well, it has quite a lot of sort of jokes in German as well.
Yeah, but actually, it's like the jokes in Latin. When the solicitor says something in Latin, it normally translates as, "I don't know what this means, but I'm saying it for the money." Yeah. We wanted to get a Sven-Göran Eriksson feel to Mr. Nutt as he's training the football team.
Yes.
So he starts talking, as von Hausenberger said, and then you go off into some kind of football stratosphere. I have to say, I have never watched a game of football in my life.
Right.
However, there are people out there who certainly will sympathise and fully understand the effects of the whistle, followed by, "You boy! All boys that haven't bought their kit will play in their pants." You always bought your kit, you're that kind of guy.
What can I say?
But
anything I say makes me sound guilty, doesn't it?
But it was great. The one time we were allowed to do hockey, because our school played rugby. Christ, help the small guys.
Yes.
And one year we did hockey, and my dad had been in India and learned how to cheat famously at hockey, and taught me how to do things like flick the ball up to shoulder height, which shouldn't go higher. And with enough force that it just stayed more or less where it was, and then you did a kind of roundhouse wallop on it, which meant it went flying up the pitch. And it didn't really matter if it had any particular direction, because we were all young adolescent boys, and so every boy was standing there with his hands cupped like that. As everybody, including my own team, used to get out of the way when I had the ball. That was such great fun. That was my only sort of, my only real dalliance with sport. But
and what about academia? Because that's the other aspect. How do you get these academics? Where do you get those from?
Academia is really, here we go again, it's about the commonality of mankind. I've sat through so many meetings when I was in the Central Electricity Generating Board. I just know, and also with the Society of Authors, everything. Every time you get into any kind of organisation where you have to have a meeting.
Yes.
You're just waiting for the trolley. Is it going to be chocolate biscuits?
The trolley, I tell you, the Central Electricity Generating Board is a different world from mine, mate. The trolley. Oh, if a trolley appeared in one of our meetings, that would be... Oh.
The Society of Authors, they were quite long. And if you know Mark Lefanu of the Society of Authors, he could run the place entirely by himself. But you had to have a sort of kind of board, so that the people there had someone to ring up if he turned up at work one day with his pants on his head. But he was a lovely guy. But we spent a long afternoon doing these things, Thursday afternoons, as I recall. And everybody, I think, was just waiting for the trolley. Will there be Garibaldi? Or possibly those ones with the dates in, you never know. And it's how it goes. And even Ponder Stibbons' talent at actually writing the minutes of the meeting before the meeting is finished.
Hasn't he got a machine, hasn't he, which allows him to work out from...
All you have to do is program it with who's there and what they're talking about, and it will all be done. Yeah. And I, as a journalist, I attended so many council meetings, and I realised I could actually write the result beforehand.
And you I mean, for academics, it's a particularly delightful book for that reason, because it's got them in. But also, I suppose, and I'm thinking there's probably lots of buried jokes I've completely missed. But for me, one of the pleasures of the book is that it's got lots of sort of literary jokes in, hasn't it? Yes?
I tend to put all kinds of, any jokes that come to hand, it's in the kind of grab box.
Yes.
And you put them in, and you think...
Well, you're right, you are a sort of alerting in advance here, but you've got to watch out for the quotations, aren't you? Because you say in the, you say right at the beginning, the chant of the goddess Pedestriana is a parody of the wonderful poem Brahma by Ralph Waldo Emerson. But of course you knew that anyway, which I rather felt I was being kind of put on my mettle when I opened and saw that.
You surely know Brahma.
I have read it.
If the red slayer thinks he slays, and if the slayer thinks he is slain.
But do you think that, do you think of sort of different readerships who have different sort of, who are raking it for different things?
The first time there was a Discworld convention, it was up in Manchester, and some media turned up. And there was, and I think 900 people turned up, every one of whom thought that they were going to be the only person to turn up. And they had a masquerade, which was kind of a bit ad hoc, but it was the first one they ever had. And one of the journalists who was having a drink with me said, I'm going to go over there and find out what they do for a living. And all the people had been in the masquerade he was talking to, and I was watching this, and God bless him, he came back to me and said, they've all got real jobs. There's a lady who's deputy headmistress of an internationally known girls' school. And they all earn more than me. That's it, you see. The whole idea that fans of Discworld, let alone fans of fantasy, are 14-year-old boys called Kevin is self-evidently wrong. First of all, there's at least one cure for being a 14-year-old boy called Kevin, and that's to wait a year. And I've been doing this for so long anyway that if the Kevin factor ever was real, now I get letters from Kevins who are in fact professor of astronomy at Oxford University, because I've been going for such a long time. And that's why I've got more doctorates than someone who has a huge number of doctorates.
Well, Terry had said to me before this evening began that I would look out upon his readers and see multifarious humanity, which I now do, and it's a chance that for all of you.
The point I'm trying to really make out, because sorry to interrupt. No, actually not sorry to interrupt anyway, because this is academia, isn't it?
Yes.
We go forward by hubbub. Reviewers have never been quite at home with me, so sometimes I'm a good guy and sometimes I'm a bad guy, and sometimes they actually try and review my perceived readers. And I'm the guy that gets to see most of my readers, and I find them in all kinds of circumstances, which is actually quite useful. Sooner or later, if we have any problem with any organisation or any manufacturer, somewhere we're going to find a Terry Pratchett fan who's going to cut through all the difficulties. My PA and myself were very amazed a couple of years ago when we got on a flight of a well-known airline, and all the cabin crew in first class were lined up with a bottle of Bolly, which was very nice. And then later on they kind of mentioned that they weren't allowed to ask for autographs. But obviously if autographs, I could...
Produce
themselves.
Yeah,
you don't know where there was... fans report where they've met other fans, like in the middle of Asia somewhere. And I did a signing in Borneo once. It had 3 humans and 15 orangutans. and I am not kidding. I'm not kidding. I went to one of these things where where kind of middle-class kids go and build bridges and things and all that and feel very good about the green environment and so on. And I was visiting it, and one of them recognised me, and he'd got some of my books, and so had 2 of the others. So we put up a camp table. And of course, the baby orangutans, because this is where they were kind of liberated back into the wild because their mums had been shot. They were up for anything that was happening. You know, one of them stole my hat. And there's pictures of me grabbing it, and I'm saying, I hope the camera isn't on me when I bash its brains out. The fun bit was while they were doing the signing, the baby orangutans were rifling through their haversacks which they'd left on the quayside of the river, and one of them had scarfed an entire bottle of vitamin tablets. And you could watch him for the rest of the day, moving very, very fast. You actually find them anywhere in any kind of, I found them in the red centre of Australia. It's amazing.
Well, your books do actually, they get read by some academics at least, and one academic I know who's a fan of yours particularly likes the fact that the librarian in your latest one and in previous ones is an orangutan, and he derives some special pleasure from that, and I'm not quite sure why.
It seems so natural,
yes,
doesn't it?
It does somehow seem just right. It's a chance now for everybody here, for the proper readers, to get to ask your questions. There are some travelling mics, so I hope you'll just be patient when because they'll have to get to you for us to be able to hear the question. But if you want to raise your hands, I'll try to be as sort of democratical, if that's the right word. There's a lady at the front there, and there's somebody in the middle there, and I will look up as well. Honestly, I will.
But there's a lady with a very fetching necklace there.
Has she put up her hand, though, or she just got...
Well, come on! Right, I think we have her.
We have this lady first, but the lady with the necklace will get it.
Okay, she'll go.
I just wanted to ask a quick, cheeky, 2-part question. The first part is, which of your characters would you most like to sit down and have a glass of wine with, and why? And the second one is, which of your characters, if they walked into a room, would you literally turn around and walk out again?
If it's the glass of wine, I think it would be Nanny Og. Because let's be clear, it wouldn't be one glass of wine, would it? And you would probably find yourself walking crabwise back to your hotel in the dawn, which would not necessarily be the dawn of the day following the day you went into the pub. I actually remember doing an event in Galway, and the guy came up with my fee and said, well, see here, here's your money, or we could, the night is young. And there was a whole sort of folk festival there, and I think I walked back to my hotel at 3 a.m. without my fee. But and it was I really understood that. Don't say to the authors, not that we'll make you totally pissed on Guinness. That's what an author wants to hear, really. So that would turn around and walk out. I don't know. I think I kind of like all the characters. I don't know if I'd get on with Commander Vimes, because I don't think he'd like me. Oh. And Granny Weatherwax would think I was...
Why would he not like you?
Because he's kind of fairly strict, and I'm manifestly a man of slaw.
Yeah.
We'd probably get on okay. I better not say to him, I created you, that wouldn't work. I think the one I share most characteristics is with Rincewind the Wizard. But I quite like Mustard Rid Cully of Unseen University because he's a decent guy. And the patrician of Ankh-Morpork,
Yes.
he practically come up to my intellectual level.
I think the lady with the bracelet.
I understand that in the past you've been a bit concerned about your books being turned into films, and
Yes.
I wondered if you would talk a bit about that.
We've had Hogfather and we've had Colour of Magic. And we are shortly going to have Going Postal. I got back The We Free Men after seeing the script, which was contained everything that the We Free Men actually campaigns against. I don't know whether can't remember now whether I put it in We Free Men or whether I left it to another book. There's a little poem. When you wish upon a star, a stupid fool is what you are. Stars are far too far away and cannot hear a word you say. And it was, everything about it was the opposite of Disney. And yet I was getting a script which looked as if a good script writer, but the studio had kind of Disneyfied it to sort. Well, actually, to make it understandable to American filmmakers, not to kids. Kids can do it themselves. But the nice thing about working with Mob Films, who are attached to Sky, is that we saw the whole of Going Postal a couple of weeks ago, and it was incredibly good. And although they have done a different ending, it is a good ending, and one I really wished I'd have written. And they did the right kind of things. They've got people like Tamsin Greene in a small part, and they've got enough extras this time round to make Ankh-Morpork look real.
Yeah.
And they do actually involve me in it. Now, when I can contrast this with the guys that did Nation for the National Theatre, they absolutely banned me from having any part in it, which is why there are some god-awful bits in it, even though overall it is rather enjoyable.
Do we have the question up there and then the lady in the middle? We'll just go up there first, madam, if that's okay. That works.
First of all, thanks for coming out. This is pretty cool of you to come and speak to us. Second of all, I was just wondering if you had any plans to bring back Moist von Lipwig.
He's ever so... look, I'm going to have to lay this one on the line. About today, I think, is the second anniversary of me being diagnosed with PCA, which is a form of Alzheimer's. Nevertheless, every time I've gone into the clinic to be tested, the answer usually is you're no worse than or possibly better than last time. No, shut up. The explanation may be that contrary to everything that my teachers thought, I've actually got quite a large amount of brain. So while things are happening, I'm rewiring faster than they can unwire. So I'm a bit loath to make any great decisions about what follows I Shall Wear Midnight, which is the one I'm doing right now. Moist is really very, very good. Because like Rincewind, he's the character who is being harried. Veterinary just puts the lever on him and away he goes. And so I've actually sketched out Moist von Lipwig in making money. Not in making money, in raising taxes. But also Moist von Lipwig in running water, which has a different one. But you know, so many books, such little time. So he may, but then, you know, it's about time that that Carrot and Angua really got married. So I ought to make an honest couple of them. So, but on the other hand, as my long-term fans know, it is actually, you should listen to what your readership says. Oh, hang on, let's get back a bit. You know,
For those listening on the podcast, that was a gesture of supreme pathos. As our guest author raised his empty wine glass to the heavens, gazed at it forlornly.
I think things are happening. I don't think I shall have to get, violent or anything like that.
But anyway, yes, you're going to tell us about the readers, yes.
You should listen to the readers, but not necessarily do what they say. And you must remember that there are the absolutely dead keen fans, and they are perhaps that percentage of the people that read you, but probably would never buy the T-shirt. And that's so. In the end, it's one guy and the cursor, and that's what it is. One guy and his rather compost heap of a mind. Because my technique of writing, I have a rough idea of how it goes. But I rely, as it were, on many, many years of serendipitical writing. You help me out here.
I think it's serendipitous, I thought.
But would it therefore be serendipitical? Right, okay.
I think that's a neologism.
I think it is.
That's allowed. Shakespeare
but the world
did it.
has been waiting for it.
Yes.
I mean, Shakespeare actually came up with, "I'll go to the foot of our stairs," you see.
He did what? He came...
For one moment, you believed that, didn't you? An old lady who in some respects was the basis for Nanny Ogg used to say, "I'll go to the foot of our stairs." I had not the faintest idea what it meant, but with repetition, it became ever so funny.
So you don't feel obliged to retrieve much-loved characters, even if you feel the readers are hungry for them.
Well, people have said, "We'd love to see Pepe in another book," because he's such a strange character. And I can't put Glenda in another book because I think her story is now, gone beyond the range of story. But I think the point is nation. I come back to nation, and for that matter, The Amazing Morris and His Educated Rodents. Every now and again, something goes like that, and it's like you've got to write it. Nation was like that. I wrote it in a fever. When I started writing, I didn't write it instantly because it was just... I came up with the idea 4 months before the Asian tsunami, so I thought, well, we'll put this one on one side. But the interesting thing is that a nice lady who was interviewing me, more or less on the same day that I had the idea, was able to stand there and say, yes, he did actually come up with this idea before the recent Asian tsunami. Because it was based on Krakatoa, but the book just unrolled. I mean, really, all I had to do was hang on, and the stuff came from all over the place. Even stuff that was, as it were, wrong.
Oh, look.
Ah!
Oh. And for those of you listening on the podcast, I've got a glass too, but mine's sort of half a glass.
You're learning.
Yes.
You've learned a lesson here that will stand you in good stead in later life.
Perhaps we should let the lady in the... Should we let the lady in the middle?
Right, please.
Yeah.
Hi. My question is, in a staring competition, who would win out of Lord Vetinari and Granny Weatherwax?
Well, that's generally thought to be a bit of a humdinger around the wall.
Oh, yes. Without a shadow of a doubt, I believe Granny Weatherwax. I like veterinary, but veterinary is nevertheless mortal. But I did enjoy veterinary drunk. That happened because I did a short tour of kind of middle Europe on one occasion, and every time we went in the back way to various stages where I was performing, there was always a drunk. And they were always going, and I realised that all drunks speak the same language. So if we wanted real world peace, like masses of this stuff should be delivered to the United Nations. And all the deliberations would be, and they'd do no harm to anybody. Granny Weatherwax, I think.
We've got one up here.
I was just wondering if you can look back and think of any characters that you're actually surprised with yourself about how they've evolved and changed over time.
Granny Weatherwax was going to be a secondary character in Equal Rights. Commander Vimes was going to be a secondary character in Guards. And Carrot, who was going to be the hero, became, in a sense, a secondary character, although he is a large secondary character. But you generally see him through Vimes' eyes, because Carrot, you see, while he's rather cunning, is perfect, more or less. Whereas Vimes is just like us. And so we can sympathise with Vimes. There are a number of things in my life that I'm quite proud of. One is that I very nearly finished my sword. And after Christmas it will be finished, because the guy who actually puts the handle on, I can't work with him, because he has to do it by himself. But I've gone and helped the guy in the forge. We dug up the ore. We built a kiln in the garden, and we smelted the ore and got 2 big blooms of iron ore. And I've done a lot of work on it, and smithing isn't tong, tong, tink, 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 it's boom, boom, for a very long time, but only for about 5 minutes, because it's got cold again and it's back in the fire. That's one of the things I'm proud of. And that I've built a bridge, a stone bridge over the river. Well, paid people to do it. The world's full of metaphors when you read it. And I've had such a lot of fun with the characters that I've invented and watched them grow. And there was a lady, shall we say, put it like this, she lives and works in a nunnery, wrote to me about the people she would like to have dinner with. If from history and St. Francis of Assisi and so on, but Commander Vimes of the City Watch was on. but in terms of the absolute coiled up emotion, and I suppose that comes to all fathers, it was the bit in Thud where Vimes, chasing the bad guys through the underground caverns, remembers that it's 6 o'clock and he should be reading to his little boy who will be listening. Mm-hmm. And so, while he's been knocked about and he's bleeding and stunned, he starts saying the words of "Where's my cow?" And every parent has read something like an analogue of "Where's my cow?" And he's doing this, and of course he wins because they think there's a maniac coming. It goes bar, boff. It is a sheep. It is not my cow, boff. I mean, what can you do against something like a madman like that? You know, all weapons are useless. And I had such fun writing that book. I've had so much fun writing the books that frankly, the millions of pounds that I've actually got seem quite illusory.
Was there a lady up there, and then a gentleman here?
Hello, I'd just like to say I'm dyslexic, and I've discovered a passion for reading through the Discworld series, and for that I'd just like to say thank you.
Hello, lady, can I just ask, can you jump up and down a bit so I can see which one? Oh, good, that's right, thank you. There is a curious link between the Discworld series and dyslexia, and I have no idea what it is, and I'm being actually serious about this. I hope there's someone somewhere that can actually tell me, because I have so many letters, and I think Rob's around here, so my PA, and he can vouch for this or get sacked. That people write in and say, my boy is dyslexic and would never read a book, and then he wrote Discworld, and now he's professor of comparative linguistics at Oxford University. And I get a lot that I used to think that there was really no such thing as dyslexia, that it was dim kids or middle-class parents thinking, let's have an explanation of having a kid who's not very bright. There may be some of that, human nature being what it is, but I actually went to visited a school for dyslexic kids, and these kids were really dyslexic. They were bright, but it wasn't just can't spell. I mean, it was serious stuff, and I thought, well, they're really not trying to kid anybody. But I had you'll be amazed at how many people have said that. There is something about Discworld which dyslexics somehow find useful or enjoyable or whatever. And I don't know what it is, which is very, very strange. So I just keep going. I had a letter once from a lady who said, was I autistic, or did I have any autistic people in my family or in my circle? And I said, well, I know a lot of computer fans. And she said, my little boy said to me, who is autistic, said to me, what do you call the hour after midnight? And she said, well, I explained to him that the hour after midnight was 1 o'clock in the morning. And she wrote, but he said to me, yes, but if there was an hour after midnight, what would you call it? Now, I think there's everybody out there hooks into this immediately. What can you do with an hour after midnight? The secret hour. The clock strikes 13. You push this, pull that, say this, and there it is. The hour after midnight that no one else has. Is the rest of the country standing still? Can you turn people around and point them the other way? Is it a different kind of thing? Is there a different race that lives in the hour after midnight? I wrote back and said, I don't know about your son being autistic, but he's certainly going to be a fantasy writer.
So can we just say thank you very much to Terry for coming and speaking.